did you know that every time I wear this shirt, I am also wearing a green eye look? Isn't that weird? I think it's weird. Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing the palette Roulette palette review on two Melt Cosmetics palettes that I have in my collection. My palette Roulettes are videos in which I review a palette that I have in my collection that you also maybe have in your collection. It's not about the newest, greatest thing. It's just about finding some use in the products that we have in our collection, and I utilize said palettes for a week and only those palettes for a week, and then I come back to you and I talk to you about my overall thoughts and opinions on the palettes, some struggles I had, maybe some wins with said palette, and then we pull a new palette. So for those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Donna. I am a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry, in which I am getting all kinds of education and knowledge on the products that we're using, the brands that we're using, and I like to bring that knowledge to you, all that education to you, and basically just like to chit chat about makeup, and you people are my people to chit chat about makeup with. So I hope that you find that you like it here, that you love it here, and that you want to subscribe before you go. And with that said, let's roll into this review. All right, so today we are reviewing these two Melt Cosmetics palettes, and the reason why I put them together is because the 420 palette is mostly mattes. It does have one shimmer in it, and the Smoke Sessions palette is mostly shimmers. It does have 2 of the 8 shadows are mattes, but it's mostly shimmer. It's a mostly shimmer palette. I didn't find that there were any kind of, I mean, even with the mattes in these two palettes and the shimmer that does exist in this palette with the shimmer that the shimmers that exist in the Smoke Sessions palette, I didn't find that there was any redundancy or any kind of overlap, so I was really happy about that. Let's look at this palette first. This is the Melt Cosmetics 420 palette. This is a really beautiful autumn toned palette, and it has that, like, can you hear that? It has that weird, like, kind of packaging to it where it looks like it's moving depending on which way you hold it. The back is much better. For whatever reason, the back is definitely much better. So this is what the packaging looks like. It is that material all the way around it. I don't like to touch the palette itself. On the spine, it still feels like it's that material, but it's not as overwhelmingly so, if that makes any sense. You open it up, it does have a nice sized mirror in it. It does take up the whole upper flap, and then this is the color story in this palette. And you can see we have got some beautiful amber tones and greens and browns, and this palette was, I mean, of course it's called 420. The colors in this palette are inspired by the vivid hues and tones found in Shatter, which is the most concentrated and powerful version of cannabis. I have to be honest, I know nothing about that. I hear absolutely nothing. So I don't know that is actually what these colors represent, but I'm certain that they do. Melt Cosmetics is, you know, if nothing, if not kind of controversial, right, with some of the stuff that they come up with. I think that this palette is beautiful. It reminds me a lot of the Naked Honey palette, although I do believe that this is probably a better formula than the Naked Honey palette, and that is just purely of my own opinion, allegedly said by me, because I don't like the Naked formula. So I do like the Melt formula, and I have to be honest, I think that this is my favorite of the Melt formulas that I have come across as of yet. This palette was amazing. All of the shadows in this palette are really super easy to use, really super blendable. They're also very, very pigmented, which is nice. They go on to your skin in such a lovely way that just makes it really easy to use this palette. Now, granted, it is a bunch of browns, but it is also greens and fluorescent shades, that like chartreusey green color over here that are really hard typically in most other palettes. This one just didn't play that way. It played really, really well, and it played really well with each other, but it also played really well with the shimmers that I was bringing in from the Smoke Sessions palette. It played really well with just about anything I paired it with. I think that this palette was fantastic. I also think that it maybe performed a little bit better with a drier base than it did with a wet base. So if you are using a creamier eye primer, definitely you'll want to set it prior to going in with these shadows. Once you put them on that creamy or like wetter base, they just kind of like to stick right there. And that's not always what you want to happen with your shadows. It makes it a little bit harder to blend if you're using it with a creamier base. I did use it today with the Primer Potion by Urban Decay, and I had zero problems with it. You will see some fallout with these shadows. I don't find that to be a problem, in my opinion, just because I do my base last. So my eyes get done first, and it's not a problem to have to wash off any kind of fallout that happens. I noticed it with all the colors, not just with the darker colors in this palette. These are a little bit more softly pressed, in my opinion. They do rack up an awful lot of like kick up in the pan, but they also rack up an awful lot of fallout on your face. So I did find that this shimmer in this palette, this one right here, it was a beautiful golden kind of like orangey hued shimmer, really pretty, and it went with every single eye look that I put with it in this palette. This palette is $58 for 0.58 ounces of product. It does have 10 shades in it, so each one of these 10 shades has the weight of each pan of 0.058 ounces, which is pretty typical. It's just a smidge bit bigger than the average size single eyeshadow pan. And there are 9 mattes and 1 shimmer in this palette. It does have a 4.2 star rating on Sephora and a 4.8 star rating on Melt. The Sephora rating does have 82 reviews that make up that 4.2 star rating. I don't necessarily think that I would rank it 4.2 stars. I think I would probably rank it around the 4.6, 4.7 star rating. I think that the biggest reason why a lot of people were ranking this so low is because of the fallout with it, and I don't deem that a deal breaker in my opinion. The other palette that I used was the Smoke Sessions palette, and this one does have pot leaves all over it. It also has a really pretty like emerald green, like almost kind of shiny packaging to it in the back, again with the pot leaves. This one, you open it up, it does have a nice size mirror on it, and these are the shades in that palette. This one, also inspired by cannabis, is inspired by the anatomy of the plant. So from the lush stems and the leaves to the dimensional buds and the trichromes of a pot plant. Again, I don't know anything about that, but I do know that, I mean, these are the colors of that rainbow, so there's that. This is mostly shimmers, so this one costs $48. It does have 2 shades less than the 420 palette, so that would explain the cost difference. It has 8 shades. These ones come in at 0.0725 ounces per pan, so just a slight bit bigger than these pans. With that said, they don't look any longer, but I do think that they are a smidge bit wider. I also think that you're gonna find a little bit of discrepancy in the weight per pan because these are mostly shimmers. And I don't know if shimmers weigh more than others, but this palette has the same weight to it that the 420 does. I do think that these pans are a smidge bit wider. Now this one has a 4.1 star rating on the Sephora website. There are a lot of reviews that give it that 4.1 star. I kind of think it has, you know, people have a bad taste in their mouth for this palette because the old formulation of this palette, like these shadows got super puffy and they kind of fell apart, right? I have not, I mean, mine's new, so I don't know anything about that. I can't speak to whether this is going to fall apart in your collection or not. The shimmers in this palette are going to fall out on your face. The mattes in this palette are going to fall out on your face. I think that the shimmers in this palette are so pretty. And these do sit better on a tacky base. You are going to get a little more impact from them if you put them on top of a tacky base. Today I have this one in my eye look. It is not on a tacky base, so you can see that it is still super impactful whether it's on a tacky base or not, but I do think that you get a little bit more of a zing from them if they are on a tacky base. This paired so well with the 420 palette. I loved that I had one that was mostly shimmers and one that was mostly mattes. I also love that this palette had two greens in it that perfectly paired with the other tones in this and were different from the other tones in this. I didn't feel like I was gypped out of anything. If anything, like this shade right here looks very similar to this shade right here, but it is a little tiny bit darker. It's more of like a brown olive than like a like army green. I think that these two palettes perfectly complement each other. You know, what I loved about utilizing these palettes is I have now green shadows in my collection that aren't hard to use. I thought that we were going to have a time, right? Because green shadows are pretty typically the hardest shadows to formulate or to formulate in a way that are easy to use. These were really easy to use. I really loved that these two palettes did not have, even though they have very similar tones to one another, that they didn't have any redundancy within the two palettes. I really loved that even though it caused fallout, it was super easy to get those dark shadows off of my face after utilizing them in my eye look. And I really loved also that the shimmers in the Smoke Sessions palette, while they might have fallen out upon application, I didn't find chunks of glitter on my eyes after, or face, all throughout the day. Some things that I did notice about these shadows, and I think it's just strictly because of the sheer pigmentation and darkness of them, is that I did notice some kind of fading a little bit earlier than I think I would have noticed it in a lighter tone shade. My camera died and I cannot remember what I was saying. So I don't like that there's a little bit of redundancy in this palette in and of itself. These two shadows here look very similar on an eye look. These two shadows here also look pretty similar on an eye look, but I do love that yellow. That yellow is one of my favorite yellows in my collection. I have to say that I think that it is probably the most pigmented yellow that I have in my collection. I also really love all the shimmers in this palette. Like, even as gold as this goes, like this one here was probably my favorite shimmer to use. Many of these go on your eye and just kind of melt onto your eye. Like I said, you do see a lot more impact with them on a tacky base. But again, this on my eye today is not on a tacky base. And I think that it is pretty spectacular. It's very impactful on an eye look. I don't think that there's anything I would change about these. I have to be honest. When I first bought these, like, they're beautiful and I wanted them, right? Because they're beautiful. But I was concerned because I do have the Muerte and the Vita palette and I love them. But there's a little bit of inconsistency in their formula from shadow to shadow. Some of them work really well and some of them just do not. Across the board, all the shadows in these two Paddles. Why do I keep saying paddles? The shadows in each one of these palettes worked really, really well. They're lovely. They go on and I look really, really nicely. I think that this one is fantastic because while it looks very, very muted and neutral and this could be an everyday eye look eyeshadow for anybody because it does have those muted, like everyday work appropriate tones, but also gives you those pops of colors. This is phenomenal for an all matte eye look. I think that the only thing that these two are lacking is like that, you know, brow bone shade. I used a highlighter in my collection as my brow bone shade. I think that this gives some wonderful pops of color for your inner corner. So this yellow and this green here are wonderful pops of color for your inner corner. And those two colors go with anything else that you're going to put on your eye look with these two palettes. So I wouldn't even say that it is missing like an inner corner shade. It's just missing that highlight shade. It's got a really nice, both of them have a really nice like deeper set of tones to the lighter set of tones, so there's a lot of depth in the palettes. I mean, really, if it's your color story and you're good to go with the price point, which I do think is a smidge bit expensive if I'm honest, I say go for it. Like the 420 palette, its biggest opportunity is its packaging. I hate touching this packaging. It makes my blood curdle in its veins. It's so bad. It makes my teeth hurt. Does that make any sense? It does. It makes my teeth hurt. With that said, if you're into melt, if you're into pot, if you're into browns and yellows and greens, I think that these are probably really good eyeshadows for you. They are lovely. They blend fantastically. They are so easy to use and super pigmented. And I was, admittedly so, I was a little terrified. Green is not the easiest color to deal with. And I was going to be out of town this week. And sometimes going out of town with a palette that you're unfamiliar with is a problem for me. So these two palettes I would definitely recommend. Let's swatch the palettes. One thing I would say too is they are really super creamy in the pan, like so creamy in the pan. A lot of times like greens can tend to be a little bit grippy, right? They're not. They're super easy. So first we have this, which is Shotgun. It is a beautiful like chartreuse green, and I know it appears really yellow in the screen, but it is a very like lime green, really pretty shadow for your inner corner. Then we have this one, which is called Faded, and it is a little bit more limey of a green. Then we have this one, which is called Chronic, and it is like a army green. Then we have Roulette, which is a deep, deep brown. This one is in my eye look today. Really pretty brown tone. I really loved this shadow. Okay, and then we have Blunt, which is kind of like a green brown, but not quite army green. I don't know if that makes any sense. You guys can see it on there. It looks very camouflage green. Then I'm going to put this one over here. We have, oh, I'm sorry. This one was called Dank. This one is called Blunt. And Blunt is kind of like an orange brown, a very mustardy toned brown. Then we have the only shimmer in this palette, which is called Shatter. And it is a beautiful like marigold shimmer. Then we have what is called Wax, and it is a yellow. I mean, look at that yellow. Look at how beautifully pigmented that yellow is. I wore that all over my lid as in an all matte eye look. I think I did take pictures of it. I hope that you guys will be able to see just how wonderfully pigmented that shadow is. Here's the other thing, like these shadows work really well for like a one shadow eye look. I know that there was one day that my eyes just kind of needed a rest, and honestly that yellow kind of irritated my eyes a little bit, and I wore it the day before. So the next day I just put like eyeliner. I put down like a eye primer. I put eyeliner on it, and then just in the crease I just put Hash, which is one of the browns that I'll go over here in a second. And it looked just so natural, so pretty, and so good. And I just can't get over how silky these shadows feel. So this one is called Full Melt, and it again is like an orange tone brown, and I think that you can see how I said that these two look very similar in an eye look. These two right here, they do. They look very similar in an eye look. This one is on first application is a little bit more orange, and this one is a little bit more brown, but in an eye look you really can't tell the difference. I use this one a lot to blend that one out because you just can't tell the difference between the two. And then the last one here is called Hash, and it is kind of more of a neutral tone brown. It reminds me of like a contour brown, a little more gray tone, and I used it almost every single day as a transition shade. That is the shades in the 420 palette. I think that you can see that there is just a smidge bit of redundancy in this palette in and of itself, but I do think that separately each shadow has its own beauty, and I think that it's just a really quite gorgeous palette. And let me know if you have the Naked Honey. I know I have a lot of friends here on the platform that have the Naked Honey. I do not. Again, I'm not a fan of the Naked formula, but let me know how you feel about this palette and those swatches compared to the Naked Honey palette and swatches, because I don't have the Naked Honey, but every time I do swatch it in store, I feel like this palette is very, very, very similar. So in the Smoke Sessions palette, there are 8 shades, and we first have Gravity OG, which is, it looks a lot like the Shatter shade in the 420 palette, but this one is a little bit more yellow golden. I feel like the Shatter shadow was a little bit more like marigold. Then we have this shade here, which is called Granddaddy, one of my favorites, you guys. Look at how beautiful that is. It's like an antique green gold. Then we have Black Widow, which is so pretty, such a beautiful like limey, dirty limey green. Then we have Sour Diesel, which is a really deep like blackened green even. Then we have Space Queen, which is a really dark like a blackened teal. And then those last two are mattes. They're the 2 mattes in this palette. Then we have Mean Green, which is a beautiful like emerald green. Then we have Sweet Tooth, which is a really beautiful teal green. And then we have Blue Dream, which is the shadow that is in my eye look today. It leans a little bit more blue green, like almost aquamarine. And this one is the most sheer of the shadows. It's a little bit more flaky than the other ones in this palette. You do have to pack it on pretty well unless you're putting it on a tacky base in order for it to show up. It is the shade that's in my eye look today, so it is possible to get it to, you know, an impactful presentation not using a tacky base, but it is a lot more chunky and flaky than the other ones are. I was actually quite surprised with how well I got along with these shadows. I would hesitate to say that I like these more than I like the Muerte and the Vita. And I love my Muerte and Vita palettes. So I just had such an easy time with these. Those two palettes take a lot of time. They take a lot of effort, a lot of blending out, a lot of blending, like blend until your arm falls off kind of blend. These ones I didn't get that from. Like these were so easy to use. So if it came down to it and somebody asked me which Melt Cosmetics palette would you purchase, would you recommend purchasing, it would be the 420. And if they asked me which 2, it would be these 2, because these are such perfect partners to each other, but also so easy to use and pretty. Just so pretty. All right, guys, I am gonna go pull my next palette and I will be right back. All right, I am on a let's try all the new things kick. I am also on a let's do 2 palettes at a time kick, because I think if you all have been around for a while, you just know I just have too much. I just have too many palettes. So I am going to pick out another palette that is brand new to me. And this one actually is pretty new on the market, but I am going to pair it with a palette that's not so new on the market. So I have Ritualistic Rose Blitz Astral Quad, and I'm pairing it with the Utopian Dreams palette. And this, I think, is going to be also another match made in heaven because these two are so, so pretty. So this is the Utopian palette. So, so pretty. Look at just how pretty this is. The problem I have is that I am traveling this week. So these will stay in their boxes while I travel. They will go into their boxes. And then this is the Blitz Astral Quad. This one is the Ritualistic Rose Blitz Astral Quad, and it looks like this. So I think these two palettes are going to go together quite well. Actually, I'm so excited to use these. The last time I used a Pat McGrath palette in this palette roulette series, I think was last year when I got the Celestial Divinity palette for Christmas. Her new Christmas launch, you guys, I just don't know that I'm going to get. I do have my eyes on a couple of her other tin pan palettes. I don't know that I'm going to get the Christmas palette this year. Not that I have a problem with the one that I have, but I just don't know that I'm going to get it this year. So these are the two palettes that I'm going to be reviewing next week. I hope that you'll want to come and join us for that review as well. Do think about giving me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of the two palettes that I just got done reviewing down in the comments section. And if you've tried these palettes, let me know what you think of those as well. I would love to have you along for future endeavors that we do here on this channel. So I would love it if you'd also subscribe. 60% of you are out there watching me and not subscribed, and while that's totally okay, I would love to have you as a subscriber on my channel, welcome you into my family, let me know that you have so I can welcome you. And yeah, with that said, guys, I hope that 2021 is treating you kindly. I hope that your Halloween was awesome because today is Halloween as I'm filming and I need to go get my daughter ready so we can go out and about in the community. And I hope that you and yours are well, you're staying safe out there, you're healthy, everyone is fine, and that you all are loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.